All right, everyone. We start off today by summing up Joe Biden's State of the Union. It didn't go over particularly well. That's naturally why a couple of the most Biden-friendly legacy outlets right now, they're praising him as being fiery. They don't really address the sum and substance. It took him 40 minutes to even talk about the border crisis. He got jeered several times during that particular stint. He meandered off from topic to topic, and I was live tweeting it. I was mainly paying attention. I mean, I had the State of the Union on, so I'm listening to it kind of passively. I was interested in seeing Donald Trump's live reaction, which I wish had been in video form as opposed to Truth Social posts. And I mean, he's not going to get as much reach by cloistering himself on that particular website anyway, though it does bleed out. People reshare that shit to other platforms. At this point, I think Trump is unhelpfully harming himself by not, for instance, going back to using Twitter. Anyway, I was trying to watch his reactions, but Truth Social crashed several times, giving errors. And that's probably because of a massive influx of people and presumptively attack by third parties. At the same time, a number of government websites went down, including FEMA. Actually, they appear to have been targeted at some point during Joe Biden's State of the Union. But I was watching, and I'm thinking, what the heck am I actually watching at times? Because it was so off the rails. To his credit, Joe Biden didn't fall down. He only stammered and had a few verbal problems, so clearly they gave him plenty of extra meds before his speech. They got him amped up. You can tell that he's on uppers. To be clear, he is on uppers at this time. He's getting gassed up before he gives these speeches. When he doesn't get gassed up before a speech, you can tell, because he's more mopey and doddering, and occasionally he gets a burst of fiery energy, and then he'll lean in close to the microphone, he did this a couple of times as predicted, starts whispering, and then acts indignant and starts yelling and scowling. And it's sort of like he's trying to be the angry old incredulous patriot. Well, I'm a relic of the former era when we believed fully in America, and I'll stand in the gap for my old ass, and your young supple asses are going to stand ass to ass and stop the evil MAGA extremists. By the way, never mentioning Donald Trump by name once during his speech, which is interesting. Instead, he called him my predecessor. Well, he's also your opponent in the election. He does actually have a name. I was thinking there was one specific moment that really stood out. Well, other than the heckling by the Gold Star father who got arrested for talking about the 13 dead Marines in the Afghanistan withdrawal. He was a guest there. I think one of the Republicans brought him in. And so that was funny. It was very brief. They shuffled him off fairly quickly. The main weird moment was when he appeared to threaten the Supreme Court on the issue of abortion specifically. It's talking about, well, you think that you can get rid of Roe v. Wade, I'm going to take you out and do push-ups and shit. I think that you'll find out soon about the power of women voters. Even the liberal justices that were there did not look pleased at that. The Supreme Court justices don't even always show up to the State of the Union. They tend to regard themselves as separate from the electoral political process, and so in some cases they're like, well, it's unbecoming. John Roberts, who has always actually attended, did you know this? He's the only Supreme Court justice who's attended every State of the Union since he's been put in his position as Chief Justice. And he's called it out before and said, well, it's devolved into a childish game, basically. It's basically bullshit, and we're above that, but he attends anyway. They did not look happy. Messing with the Supreme Court and effectively threatening them, not necessarily the greatest thing to do if you want them to play nice with you and not say, well, we have the power to not take this case that's been put forward and, the Biden admin got shot down by a lower court. They're asking us to consider it. Maybe. I don't understand the strategy involved there. The Supreme Court is not a political entity, and Biden should know this. A lot of Americans think it's a political entity, and it's politicized at this point, but they are not elected officials. So that was a weird moment. He got heckled by Marjorie Taylor Greene, who got him to address the Laken Riley situation. Of course, the college kid there that was killed by an illegal immigrant from Venezuela. But he called her Lincoln Riley for some reason. That was a verbal blunder. And he shouldn't have addressed it at all. He got trolled into saying her name. Kinda, sorta. And so that definitely didn't go over well. One good moment was when he made the joke about the Snickers in his shrinkflation thing. Of course, shrinkflation does not actually apply to the current economic situation. The Biden economy is poor. There's a lot of inflation. It's not actually easing. By the way, payroll just got revised sharply downward for January. So, again, the funny numbers, the fuzzy math continues to get exposed. It's just it always gets exposed belatedly, unfortunately. So very few people know or care. But he was rambling about shrinkflation and talking about how, well, you know, you used to get this box of cereal and then they kept putting more air in it and stuff. That is true. Fact check, true, but it doesn't apply to the situation. Shrinkflation applies to when companies, to increase profit margins, reduce the amount of a product while maintaining the price. This is not shrinkflation, though. This is them saying we can either raise the price of the product, giving people sticker shock, or we can reduce the size of the product and maintain the price that they're used to, and many companies have opted for the latter. They're not doing that in order to make additional profit. They're doing that in order to maintain their current profit margin. That's because of Bidenflation. Biden will not explain this to people. Many people do not understand even how inflation works, and so trying to explain it to them generally is bullshit. Bidenflation and shrinkflation are not the same thing. If I'm paying 10% more to create the product, I can either raise prices commensurate with that, or I can reduce the amount of product and maintain the price. Ta-da! Long as it's not shrinkflation. It's Bidenflation. It's not because companies are trying to bilk you. It's because companies are trying not to go out of business, in other words. They coined that term during the inflationary cycle of the 70s. And then it also applied. I would point out that there's also one other glaring difference that Biden never addresses, and he lived through it because he was a senator at the time. The other problem was the deceptive labeling and the deceptive packaging. Because in the old school shrinkflationary cycle, companies would keep the same size of the box, and they literally were putting less and less cornflakes in it. These days, of course, that's already been cracked down on. And so they have to reduce the size of the package commensurate with that. And so, at the very least, you're seeing the product as it actually is. So, the State of the Union, I'll give him credit for not being a totally incoherent mess, although, again, that's the amphetamines, mostly. It's the Adderall. I'll give him credit for the Snickers joke, because I chuckled at that. And it was funny to see him talk down to the Republicans multiple times, and he always makes that crazy face, where he's like, yeah, the Adderall face, quite literally, and then sort of challenges them and talks down to them. I like to talk down to the Republican Party too, but Biden's definitely not the champion to do that now, is he? And his alternative is somehow worse. So it was a mess. He's being panned even by some liberal outlets, and the cope is real. Like, look at Politico. If you go to RCP, you can see the Politico headline. And it's basically like, well, he did as good as he can, basically. You know, he did the best he can. That's, you know, he didn't fall over. That's a big win for Joe Biden. I was thinking, I mean, even my dad was remarking this morning. He's like, well, I'll give him credit. You know, he didn't make any huge verbal errors. And I'm like, yeah, but we've gotten to the point where that's what we're giving him credit for, you know, the most major speech that a president makes each year. I don't think that's a good thing. I think that's a rather unfortunate thing. I look forward to Trump's State of the Union addresses. He can go off the rails too into La La Land, by the way. He rambles constantly. It's just he doesn't have dementia, so it comes off a little bit easier. That's about all. Peace out.